Okay, so guys, thanks very much for coming on. Before we start, if you could just give a little insight into a little bit about your background into coaching, what you're currently up to. If we sort of start left to right, so as the way I see it, Salliann, you're top left.
Yeah, so I'm now Salliann was Briggs. Pretty much been coaching now for 15 years, I reckon. So worked through, I guess, a junior pathway system. Was lucky enough to work on an England Academy programme and at Loughborough University under the very good guidance of Graham Dilley. He kind of shoved me in the right direction from a coaching point of view. And from that system, kind of moved through to the Loughborough Lightning Women's Programme, and then through the ECB's female pathway as a coach, and now find myself in Tasmania, so pretty far from where I started, but I'm now the female Tigers head coach and Hurricanes female head coach.
Excellent. And Kevin, I think you're up next.
Okay. I was a professional cricketer for Hampshire, Middlesex and Somerset, forced to retire through injury, funnily enough, for a fast bowler. And then I became head coach of Somerset for 5 years and moved into the role of national lead for fast bowling for the ECB for 14 years. And the last 18 months had the pleasure of working with Mr. Paul Franks at Nottinghamshire County Cricket Club as an assistant coach, pretty much. Well, obviously up to now, but with a view to looking after the fast bowlers.
Okay, excellent. And then finally down to Franksy.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I've been coaching now for 8 years. Much like Shiny, I had a professional career with Nottinghamshire. I was retired, shall I say, at about the right time and moved into coaching, worked with the second 11, and across the player pathway, academy, and senior emerging player program. And now work alongside Shiny as a team of 4 underneath Peter Moore's ex-England coach, well-renowned coach, top man. And I've just taken my first tentative steps into franchise coaching. I've done some work in the recently finished Abu Dhabi T10 League, and I'll be doing some work this coming summer with the Trent Rockets.
Yeah, so I think from my research, both Paul and Salliann, you're going to be involved in the 100. Are you both looking forward to that? And Kevin, are you involved in the 100 at all?
No, I'm going to be staying with Knots, otherwise we'll have no coaches left.
Yeah, very much looking forward to it. Obviously, we didn't get going last year, so I'm excited to be a part of something that I think is going to be incredible, particularly for the female game.
Yeah, so obviously that's just been given the green light as well to be the first game within the competition as well. The ladies' game is first up.
Yeah, I think, with what's happened with the pandemic, they've had to reshuffle things and make it biosecure, and it's actually worked out very well to, with all the games being double headers and the women getting the first profile game. I think it's probably worked out better for the female side, but it should be pretty exciting.
And then Franksy, with yourself assisting, you must be looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, obviously we've had some significant change. Stephen Fleming can't join us this year as head coach, so we've moved on to Andy Flower, another world-renowned head coach. Shiny's worked with him in the past and has still been on all his bits and bobs, and now he likes to go about his work. So I'm looking forward to working with him. The 100 is out there and it's open to be shot at. I'm excited about working in it. I agree with Salliann. I think it's brilliant for the game as a whole. And I think people will either love it or loathe it. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think on that, the T20, when it first came around, that was sort of shot down pretty quickly. And that's probably the market leader at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And understandably so. It's put bums on seats all around the world. It's a fantastic product. I think the ECB are now trying to match that T20 product with something new and diverse, try and bring new people into the game. I'm looking forward to seeing how it develops.
Yeah, and then just a few questions along the way, but one for you, Franksy. How did you find sort of transitioning from playing straight into coaching? Because obviously you moved pretty quickly from playing straight into coaching.
Yeah, I've done a little bit. been to Australia and tried to coach Australians. If you've had a go at that, then you're probably ready to go. But yeah, I'd spent a couple of winters overseas trying to do some coaching while I was playing at the same time, and that presents its own challenges. But yeah, I'd always thought of the idea of coaching and wanting to coach. And I think initially when I got into coaching, I probably wanted to do it for the wrong reasons. I thought it was all I ever knew, and I thought I was going to be quite good at it. And as I got into it, then I realized that maybe I just needed to give myself a bit of space and just chill out a little bit, and then progressed to where I am now, which is, pretty easygoing, pretty phlegmatic about stuff and quite hard working. So yeah, I really enjoy it for what it is. Enjoy working with players and teams and seeing where it goes.
And then Kevin, you sort of were a bit the same. So you took the England bowling job at only the age of 36. How did you find that? Because obviously you're working with players who are very similar in age to yourself.
Well, I'd had 5 years at Somerset before that as a head coach, and I've got to be brutally honest, I was too young. And you learn by experiences. So I wouldn't change it for the world, but I would do it very differently if I was to do it again. But yeah, it was a baptism of fire, because I went to the Ashes 2006-07, and that was a 5-0 whitewash, followed by the World Cup, which didn't go particularly well. And I remember coming back absolutely exhausted from that. And a great man called Gordon Lord, who was the elite coach education manager, sort of put me back on my feet again, because if you continue to take big hits, sometimes you need to just take a step back. And I probably reviewed that in a pretty honest way with Lordy, and based, I probably tried too hard, and I thought I could be all things to everyone, and that's not the case as a coach. You've got to almost just try and flow and let people learn about themselves. And it was a huge learning for me, then moving through my time as a national lead and being lucky enough to work with all the younger fast bowlers that were coming through, seeing them transition through to England. And now, another totally different experience. Even though I've worked in county cricket before, going back into it, it's a completely different game to the 14 years previously. And I'm learning about that again.
Yeah, so I was going to ask that, sort of, has the game just moved completely in a different direction?
Yes, it has. So I would have finished playing as professionalism was starting to come in. And then obviously saw it take off massively, and was lucky enough to be a part of, trying to build this New England side and the new ways around training, preparation, just professionalism. And you go back into county cricket, and I think Franks will hopefully agree with this. All of our county cricketers, first of all, they've got to be good enough to play for Notts, but then they all aspire to go on to higher honours. And the scrutiny is massive in county cricket now. It wasn't when I played, and not as much when I was coaching it. So there are huge amounts of pressures on these players and the coaches, to be fair, because it's professional sport. So it's definitely changed. It's not quite as carefree as when I played, but it's definitely changed for the better, especially for people who now get unbelievable opportunities to get better if they want to take them.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No. Definitely. And then Salliann, for yourself, how did you sort of get involved with coaching? Was it throughout your entire playing career, or did that sort of come after?
Yeah, no, I kind of did it alongside playing. So I played for Yorkshire for all my playing career, and then went through myself the England pathway. So I loved my time there, and part of that experience was, I got the opportunity to work with the Yorkshire pathway. And I just really enjoyed it. And if I compare my playing to coaching, it wasn't until I fully immersed myself in coaching that I realized that it ticked all my boxes. I definitely find that a lot more self-worth in and around taking someone else on a journey. I don't know what that is for me. Pushing myself, it wasn't rewarding as taking someone else to somewhere special. I didn't really realize that till I went into coaching. And that was, when I got to Loughborough University as a student, I met Graham Dilley, and that's where the high performance centre was for the ECB. I kind of just, turn up on a weekend and see how things how you do things. And I worked pretty much with the age groups for 2 years, just rocking up as someone who would stand in the background and seeing how things, or how people would operate in their own coaching styles. And then from that, you said, well, actually, you're going to take this seriously, and you do your level 3. And then I got on my level 4 and did my level 4 with Francie. God, he was interesting back then.
Thanks, Sal.
Which blossomed into a lovely friendship. And then, I just started to get these head coaching roles. I think one thing that did put me in good stead into, I guess, these leadership positions was I always captained. I captained Yorkshire, captained all the England age groups teams I played for. And I just worked out that I love the responsibility. I'm not a good person in that assisting role. I think I need that responsibility. And sometimes I like to say things that I probably step on too many people's toes at times. But it wasn't until I was about 31 I actually took a step back from playing and then immersed myself fully into coaching from that. So I had a couple of years where I was probably trying to, head coach a program and play, which was pretty challenging. But women's cricket wasn't properly professional then. And then I took my role as the high performance manager at Wbbl University, working as the men's assistant coach. And then we formulated a women's program off the back of that. But
did you ever
that's how it all happened.
Did you ever get any sort of kickback from coaching men's teams? Was there any reluctancy of men listening in, or is that, something that didn't happen?
Yeah, I did actually. At the time, when Dill was like, right, you're leading this session, I thought, you absolute gits, because I wasn't ready. Like, I didn't feel I was ready, but my God, he pushed me. And at that point I was like, you're pushing me too hard. But the skills I learned and stepping out of my comfort zone, I'm much more thankful for it as I reflect back now. Like, I remember throwing balls to Sam Billings. He was a lot scrawnier back then, but to see a male player and played a very small part in those 4 years that he had at Loughborough, I'm very thankful for those moments. But I got a lot of respect and support back then, and I have throughout my whole journey. A lot of people will talk to me about, did you feel discrimination? What was the equality like? Was it hard work in a male-dominated world? I think it is, and I think I've got a responsibility to shift people's lenses, but my experience was a true great one, and it still is.
Yeah, no, definitely. Obviously the game, like we said, is moving in that direction, which is great for ladies cricket, and in particular for us in Guernsey. Obviously we've got international status down the sort of ladder, if you like, but yeah, no, definitely an opportunity for women's cricket. With regards to sort of winter training, this is an open question to any of you guys. How does that look, and how's it sort of structured?
Want me to fire on that one first? Well, basically, we slightly different during COVID times. I think normally we run what we would call a winter program that starts early mid-November, and we try and break that program up into 3 sections between, like I say, the early part of November, the Christmas break, and then a separate section into the February half term, and then sort of the final run of pre-season comes during this period now, which is the lead into proper pre-season playing games, which obviously is up and coming in about 2 weeks. And you're asking the players all sorts of various questions, really, about where they were as individuals over the course of the previous season. You're trying to put credit in the bank based on the fact you're going to ask a lot of them physically, so there's an expectation that sits there for them to be the best version of themselves. And as myself and Shiny experience from day to day, some of them do it and do it great, and others of them still press the buttons and don't always get it right. And that's even in this, what we would consider modern professional era. And ultimately that will continue to get more professional and more testing. But that's the rough guideline for how we try and structure our winter program. Any more, Shiny?
Well, that very eloquently. Francie?
Said no one ever.
Yeah, it feels a long time ago, our pre-season now, because we're at the back end of our season. And in Tasmania, I think fortunate in some case because, you know, if you didn't turn the telly on here, you probably wouldn't know COVID existed. It's bizarre experience for, you know, someone from England, having your family going through everything, and then you're in Tasmania and have been living a pretty normal life for a long time now. But for as far as winter programming goes, it's a long stretch for players, and the key thing for me is always trying to keep them excited and wanting to come up and train day in, day out. And the thing that I've really bought into of late was, you know, only doing training blocks throughout a long pre-season and making sure the players get a good week off. And it's not so much from a physical point of view, it's a mental point of view. We've got to make sure that players come back excited. You know, we train in a very sterile environment most of the time, in a long rectangle, and it represents nothing of our game. We've got to make it exciting and keep them eager to want to come back and miss the game. So yeah, I think the biggest thing I do now is just try and work in 4 or 5 week blocks, get rid of them for a bit and let them come back ready to go again. But it follows a similar process. You know, we try and make it very individual, you know, to their needs, to make sure they're ticking off the things that they need to develop, and also keeping an eye on, you know, what we need as a team moving forward.
And in relation to bowlers, do bowlers get a lot of sort of off time in the winter, or, you know, do they keep sort of bowling throughout, obviously to avoid spikes in workload?
Do you want me to answer this one?
Yeah,
go Shiny.
So here you go. Hopefully a lot of coaches are going to like this. Bowlers should never stop bowling, and they should never stop training. I've got a huge dislike of the word periodization. I get it. I understand it. I know where it comes from, but I think it gives players an excuse to have a rest and probably undo a lot of really good work that's already been done. I'm not talking about turning people into machines. You know, you've got to have downtime. You have to have other interests outside of cricket. That is a must. But if you choose to be a professional bowler, the non-negotiable there is you have to keep training and you have to keep bowling. And I think it's pretty well backed up by some great research. Also, if you look back in history, and you must be absolutely respectful of history, bowlers bowled an awful lot more overs than we do now. Now, the game has changed. You've got to be able to field. You've got to be a better athlete. You've got to be able to field well. You're scrutinised with regards to the paces that you bowl. But the fact is, you know, when you look at the overs that the bowlers of yesteryear bowled, they bowled an awful lot more. And when you look at the way they played or trained, they just kept going. And you know, I'm trying to work that into the Notts bowlers for now. I was trying to do that before I left the ECB, which is to just try and keep people going. And some coaches here will know about chronic and acute workloads. It sounds a bit technical, but chronic, you just keep them flowing. And acute is the spike. As soon as you get these spikes, you can almost guarantee that 28 days later, they go bang. And we've seen really good examples of that. So through this winter, I've been trying to just slowly build in around about 150 to 180 overs into their one-to-ones. So as Francie said there, we sit down, we do their sort of case conference, we work out what they would like to work on, and that's very much a conversation. We might actually come in and steer them a certain way. But bottom line is, then I try and build their technical work or their skill work into that 150 to 180 overs by the time we got to the 10, which was 2 weeks ago. Right. So now we're able to effectively let them go and try and game harden them up. And that's another massively important part of their development. You're trying to stop them from becoming training camp bowlers. You know, there's a certain amount of that they have to do, but then you have to let them go and find out about themselves. And trust me, I find that very difficult, because my preferred way is to nurture. And working with Peter Moores, who's you know, a fantastic coach to work for. I mean, he does prod the players, but he prods myself and Francie quite hard as well. You do have to
really stay on your game with Peter. And I really appreciate that, because I've worked a little bit in isolation working for the ECB. You're a national lead and you just do your thing, produce your bowlers, get on with it. And you do have a Lions tour, you see if you can get them through to be good enough, then you go on to the next phase. This is much more about helping these guys to grow over a long period of time. So my absolute advice to anyone working with fast bowlers now is keep them bowling, keep them training, and then help them to become hardened match players by, having those groups rather than periodization. You've got a nice sort of flow to your year, whether you're working with younger players or hardened players. Just try and get that same flow in place.
And then obviously alongside that, I guess strength and conditioning sits alongside it, and probably something which has really developed over the last 15 years.
Yeah, absolute non-negotiable. Now, there's a lot of press goes out there which would say that fast bowlers should not lift weights. Absolute rubbish. They say that they get injured lifting weights. Absolute rubbish. They get injured bowling. Unless they're very badly coached in a gym, they always get injured bowling. You have to try and write an insurance check which will allow you to try and do your job for as long as you can. One thing is a guarantee: as a fast bowler, you are getting injured no matter how hard you train. Frank Sear will definitely back me up on that one, and I'll definitely back myself up on that one, having spent quite a bit of time on the slab. So what you try and do is get into a condition, so both physically and technically, that you can be really efficient. And then you can actually evolve your skills, go out and enjoy it. And then when you get injured, hopefully it doesn't last for too long, but the people around you will help you then get back. And then you can start that sequence off again. And hopefully the injuries become less and less and less. But I think that's then the way to enjoy yourself. So yeah, the strength and conditioning is a non-negotiable, but make sure you've got a really good person to help you with that. And make sure it is specific for the type of bowler you are.
Shiny, just on that, when you talk about 150 to 180 overs, where does that come from? Because I know you're big on all your research. And the other thing is, how do you feel about bowlers bowling back to back in training? So like back to back days. Just for my development.
So I sort of still go on I worked it out the way Peter Moores wanted to run in those blocks, as Frankie mentioned, those blocks. I then sit down and, in my really boring, nerdy way, I use a special spreadsheet that I've got, which actually has the formulas for chronic and acute workloads. And you look to not take them over 150% of their previous 7 days. Now, listen, I'm a thick fast bowling coach, and I've had to sit down and work very hard to understand this, but it does work. I still work around the principle, if I can, on the 7-4-2, which is in a 7-day block, no more than 4 days, and no more than 2 days in a row. I'm a big fan of back-to-backs once you get them going. We've only now just started our back-to-back bowling. So during the winter, we can only train indoors. And, even if in your best shock padded indoor school, it's still twice as hard as the hardest pitch in the world. Yeah. So you have to be mindful of that. So I was really only running them on 15 overs a week. So, you work the maths out on that. And I worked out that if I could get them to 150 overs by building them slowly and working this chronic workloads, I'd then be able to get them to 20 overs a week, which made practice useful. Because remember, you do have to make sure your bowlers don't like to say it, but they're there to actually bowl at the batters as well. Yeah. So you want to make sure that, we've got eight to 10 fast bowlers, including our all-rounders. Then you've got your spinners. You want to make sure that your practices are really good as well. So I can say to Peter, well, you've got X amount of overs. So today we've just run a practice with, how many overs was it again, Francie, we had in that practice today?
Yeah, 42 and 42, 84.
Yeah, so 84 overs of practice in the tent with all of our proper bowlers. That's good practice for our batters as well. Yeah. But I'd actually just quietly been, so I've projected through till the second championship game. And I'm trying to make sure, and I would have done that as soon as we got the fixtures. That's when I started to work that sort of stuff out. So when Peter comes to me and says, right, how many overs can the bowlers bowl? I'm able to say straight away, they've got this, this, and this, double spell day here, double spell day there. He trusts me, which is great. He trusts me with the information I give him, and he then designs the practice around that. You know, and he'll run it through myself, Francie, and Bota, and you know, we'll try and put something together that's really meaningful. And I'm happy because the bowlers are getting their match fix, which I need them to get, slowly building their chronic workload up to 30 overs before our first game. So that's 30 overs in a week. Yep. And then when we go into match practices or matches, I'm sort of budgeting 40 per bowler, which is an awful lot. You know, if a bowler's bowling 40 overs for the whole of the season, they won't be able to do that. It's almost impossible. But it means I've got that, you know, that 150% number that I told you about. So that keeps going up and up and up the more you put on. And just the 150 is what I worked out from. I only wanted them to bowl 15 overs a week on a hard indoor school. That would be, it becomes very different during the season once they're, you know, I have to get them ready for 40 overs. So a Jake Ball or a Luke Fletcher will have, you know, they'll bowl 40. I mean, Jake was bowling 50 overs in some of our games, which we knew that was a huge risk when a bowler does that, because it puts them through a huge spike. But then we have to try and calm them down. The numbers, unbelievably, the numbers work. And for someone who wasn't great at maths, I've had to work with that. And it's been really useful for me. So I do spend a lot of time planning. The guys don't see that. They just know the overs that they bowl. But I do spend an awful lot of time planning because I know the numbers on injuries.
Great, thanks.
Kevin, when did that period start from? Is that October onwards or?
Yeah, so they obviously ended the season. We ended the season late because we were playing T20, the T20 finals in October. That was chilly, wasn't it, Francie? And then you do have to give them that downtime. You find, I mean, it's really interesting. You find the modern younger cricketers, they tend to keep training. They get very bored. You give them time off and they're just desperate to get back. So they were ticking over in the gym pretty much from when we finished. But you don't do that with all of them. You do give them a month down from bowling. You do have to deload them for that month. They really do need that. Yeah, so then it was November the 8th, whenever Peter wanted us back, we started the gym program. But I worked then with the physio and the S&C. So we'll work out what their program needs to look like, and that'll be a bespoke program for each of the fast bowlers. I'll then work the numbers around that. So while they're in their major strength phase, I'll literally work around the S&C to work out the numbers that they can do. And then when we move towards the 10th, which we're in now, obviously, they then work around me. So there's a flip when I'm saying, no, cricket's more important now, but pre-Christmas, their training's more important. So I'll let you have that bit, and then I'll have the other bit.
And then how do you cater alongside that? For example, you use Jake Ball there. He obviously went to the Big Bash. Do you have to track his overs that he's bowling over there in nets and games alongside what he
So we get sent his GPS numbers. Right. So he'll wear a GPS unit on his back. And in Australia in the Big Bash, they were brilliant. Their system is excellent. We use GPS as well. And we're able to watch those loads. But one thing I will say is when you put someone over the white line, just let them go. Don't worry about workloads. Don't worry about anything that will make them anxious about getting injured. Remember that the minute they step over the white line, it is battle, and you go in there. If you have to bowl 50 or 60 overs in that game, so be it. We'll try and get it so we can cool you back down. But remember, this is sport, and you've got to let them go out there and enjoy it. And one thing I tend not to let or encourage any of our coaches is to talk about workloads in front of a bowler. Especially when you say, "Oh, if you bowl too many overs, you get injured." It's much more about, look, get out there, really enjoy it, because you're going to get injured anyway. Yeah, but enjoy it while you're doing it, and then hopefully with the condition you've got there, you'll be more resistant. If you pick up an injury, you'll come back a little bit quicker. Yeah, there has been an awful lot of noise around, injuries. You can't do this. You can't do a squat. You can't do a deadlift. Rubbish. You do it well, it'll protect you.
Right. Yeah. And then in relation to batters, probably one more for Salliann or Franksy. They can pretty much train whenever for however long and have limited risks.
Yes, I suppose so. What I would say is there are different breeds of the bowlers. I think everybody knows that. They operate with a different approach towards the game from a mindset point of view. The advent of the sidearm has changed batting coaching forever. The ability to facilitate practice without bowlers means that we can do so much more than just put a ball in a bowling machine. We don't have to flog the bowlers like we used to have to do in the previous generation in bowling at them. We can provide them with the challenges that they need specific to red ball and then white ball cricket and the shorter format. So yes, they all get a lot of attention. As Shiny mentioned with the bowlers, we do run similar programs with the batters. We get them in at different times, and some will be overhauling their games at different times and looking for new things, and others will be tweaking and monitoring and making sure that they're in control of what they're doing if they've had a good season or come off the back of a good period of form. Sal, any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think whether this is batting or cricket in general, but I feel it more with batters is they're pretty confident in what they think they need, and obviously it's different for how the cricket has matured, but I definitely think there's some education and awareness in around, I know you think what you need, but actually the game is evolving so much quicker, and this is actually what I feel you need, and those conversations in around, you found a method, you always peak and trough as a batter. So keeping, I guess, the mindset, like Franksy said, in the right place all the time can be challenging. But yeah, I just find that with batters more so is that there's you've got to be careful because you don't want to set them off tilt, but I think you've still got to always want to push them and make them the best they can be. So don't be afraid to challenge at times.
Absolutely, I'd agree with that, Sal. I think batters, I would say, are more inclined for what they want. I think bowlers understand what they need potentially more than batters, and that's the sweet spot all the time with coaching. It's that element of challenge against the element of delivery.
I think it might do, like with batters, you'd argue that you probably only get one chance in a game, and therefore, you've got that fear of failure, etc. And you're probably a little bit hesitant in going to a place that that's going to make your game massively better, but actually you've found a system that's got you to where you are, and you're okay with it. I think that's the biggest thing. And, I see it more so in T20 cricket when, when you've got to manipulate fields and there's a shot that you can't play. Well, actually, you get stuck at a certain time. So, how we keep expanding that and keeping that growth mindset and your eyes open into, just you're doing well, keep the confidence and belief there because that's massively important. But, let's look at new ways to get better. And
getting better does look different. It looks different for everybody. Often when someone says to a player or to a coach, player A or player B has got better, what does better look like? Is better more volume of doing the right thing over and over again, or is better I've made a technical change? The danger is we lean on technique as an improvement when often it can be just repetition of the same thing to give you the best chance to succeed. Excuse me.
So on that technical side of things, when are you likely to make changes on technique? Do you leave that to off season, or do sometimes you have to make technical changes within the season as well?
Well, within the English game, you'd be pretty brave to start making massive technical changes within the season unless someone was having an absolute train smash and you had a period of time where you were going to be able to take them out of the line of fire. I think if you were going to make tweaks to particularly batting, from a batting point of view, I think you would need to know that they probably weren't going to be put under too much pressure to play over the week or two, maybe even month, that you were going to implement some change to give them the chance to put the volume in, so then the next time they step into the white heat of battle, like Shiny says they're ready to go.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, I follow a simple batting process, and I think it comes under 3 areas. I'm always keen to see where the batter is at point of release. Have they got a true understanding of their strengths, and then look at where they are on decision making, and I try and pocket them. I put those circles together where they overlap, and I try and put a rubber stamp where I think the batter is on that. And sometimes that might be, in season where, the batter could be falling over or something. So I think in those instances, you probably got to address it there and then, because it could be as simple as that. I'm really big on, the point of release position where you can move in any which direction as quick as possible. And if you're stuck there, you're making everything hard for yourself. But yeah, you would like to think that you do most of that hard work in, helping the player understand their game and their strengths, when to attack and defend, that sort of stuff, and give them a model to go and be confident with when they play. But if it needs addressing, it needs addressing.
And then, Francie, in relation to associate cricket, you've obviously helped with the UAE. How have you found that, and how have you found the difference between associate cricket in relation to professional cricket with Notts?
Well, yes, subtly different, very different. Obviously, working with a completely different culture to start with. Completely out of my comfort zone initially to go and work in the Middle East with people whose first language isn't English. That tests your coaching to an extreme. So the simple language of cricket then became very, very easy to try and communicate. So once you understand that the people you're working with and why they play, what reasons they play cricket for, what progressions they're looking to make, how you can help that, then you can start to make steps forward. Ultimately, it taught me that they didn't really care what I knew to start with, but they just wanted to know that I cared, because I think they'd probably been left to their own devices for quite a long time. And it was around about a time when cricket in the UAE was trying to turn professional. So they were trying to put structures around them. They were trying to contract the boys more. There was more coaching coming. So initially, it was a case of, right, let's go slowly to start with. We don't want to overwhelm them with too much information. Let's just provide the support, try and provide some structure, and let's see how they go. Now, the bit that surprised me was that they tend to have quite a lot of flair. They like to think that they've seen a lot of things in the PSL and on the TV in the IPL and watched all sorts of cricket globally, and they've all got heroes that play the global game. And obviously, a lot of that part of the world is expat-related cricket: Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka. So they've got cricket in their heritage. They understand the game. What they tend not to want to do is the basics. They have this avoidance of doing the basics time and time again. Now that took, and I was lucky enough to work there for probably over 3 or 4 years in pockets, but that took probably until the start of the 3rd year for them really to get the gist of understanding the basics. For instance, the basics of fielding. To want to do the basics well was going to stand them in good stead to go and compete with the teams that they needed to compete with, to then go again. They would always then have the ability to bowl a wicket maiden as the first over of a T20 game, or have a mystery spinner bowl in the 15th over, or do something spectacular as a one-handed pick up and throw the stumps down. But the stuff that they should have been doing more and more of, like catching a high ball at long on, they just didn't want to do, and they weren't interested in it. So ultimately, we had to make it interesting. We had to make it challenging, and they gradually started to progress. So that would be my overarching theme of my time with them, would be that they had an avoidance of the basics to start with. I think they started to get them more and more, and a lot of those boys now are exposed to play franchise cricket, and have done well doing so. And I'd like to think that if I left them with anything, it would be to do the basics more often.
Yeah, no, definitely resonates for Guernsey as well. Obviously, we're a bit further down than the UAE, but yeah, no, definitely. We talk quite a lot about the basics, actually, so it's interesting to hear you say that. Kevin, in relation to your role with England, how did you find the constant sort of on-the-road travelling? You probably didn't spend a huge amount of time in England, did you?
Nope. I think I worked it out in for some reason, I just sat there in my 8th year working for the ECB, and I was flying somewhere, I can't remember where it would have been, and I'd been away from home for 3.5 years at that particular point, and had a young family as well. So it was a fantastic part of it, but it was a tricky part of it. And I'm very, very draining. However, that was always overtaken by the ability or the opportunity to work with a great set of coaches. The support staff were very, very close. There's some excellent people there, and then the different players. To have the privilege to work with hundreds of players, and and very, very good players, it just expands you as a coach hugely, because we would get different intake every year. So you'd have 15 to 18 on a performance program, and then your England Lions tour might then be a 15, but then some of those would be different. There'd be a pace program coming in as well. You'd get injured players coming down from England that you had to rehabilitate as well. So you had this unique opportunity to see lots of different players, but also in lots of different environments. So Bangladesh, India, South Africa, Australia. We actually had a period where most of our winter tours, they were really, really keen to hit the subcontinent, obviously, and get better out there, which obviously hasn't worked too well in this last tour. But an awful lot of work has been done in the subcontinent. And actually, from my point of view, going to there as a fast bowling coach was brilliant. So the Wbbl team has effectively been born from there. The fact that we now are much better at reverse swing. We'd use a different ball. You'd use an SG ball, which is effectively a very cheap cricket ball, and it deteriorates really quickly. And to understand then that you've got different types of Wbbl seams, you've got different. You use your pace ranges differently. So if a bowler has a cruise speed of 80 miles an hour, they might actually sit at 75 to 76 and move up and down that pace range a little bit more, and then save a little sort of eyeballs out over for here or there. We worked on lots of different strategies for that. So the opportunity to go away and do that was absolutely fantastic, and also to see how players operated in Sri Lanka, which unbelievable humidity when you're playing in places like that. And I think they all, from a character perspective, when you see especially the fast bowlers coming off, or a batter who's come off and batted all day, or in one of the 50 over games it stayed in, it's brutal what they went through, but it did toughen them up. And I'm very proud to have been a part of that, and seeing how England are moving on now, and they generally do compete really well in most places in the world now. And that's been through an awful lot of work abroad on England Lions tours, pace programs, performance programs, whatever it's been. Underpinning all the work that England did was a big program down to the under-19s as well, who go to those places too. And it is a huge privilege to go to different cricketing nations. And what's really interesting as well is the coaches are all very, very open. So you would spend time talking to your opposition coaches and actually learning from them as well, because you do reciprocal tours, which was nice. So generally we had agreements where no matter where we toured, so if we toured in India, they would then come back the following year to us. So you actually got a decent camaraderie with the other coaches, and you've learned huge amounts from them.
No, it sounds fascinating. And then Salliann, we've had a couple of questions that have come in from people on the chat. How do you feel the Wbbl is sort of competing and developing against the men's format?
Yeah, I think, well, it's a few years behind the men's BBL. I think there's about 5 years in it, but my word, it's shifting now. And the investment from Cricket Australia to make sure the women's programs get in the profile. I think the biggest thing that I've noticed since being over here, female sport is on free-to-air TV all the time, whether it's AFL or cricket. So it's got a huge engagement of fans. an investment. It's not just younger girls watching the game; it's everyone. And they've put a lot of work to make sure that women's cricket gets the profile that it deserves over here. I think naturally, cricket being the #1 sport in Australia makes that an easier target to achieve, so to speak. But you can I guess the players from a profile point of view probably are getting the same recognition as the male players. If they go to a restaurant, that type of stuff, all the Aussie girls, they're well known now and because of that profile. So I'm like Shiny talks about his experience of being privileged. I feel very fortunate to work in probably the best female domestic competition in the world. I've learned a lot, certainly, from the experience. And Hurricanes, it's been challenging. We've probably not had near the success that we're looking to achieve. So it's been a long journey, but I've been fortunate to work with some incredible players and work with some great coaches.
Is there much of a mix between the men's franchise side as well as the women's? So do they mix together much, or is it very much two sort of separate entities?
I think that it did before. Like the competition now runs at separate times of the year. So what again the CA did very well was they captured a spell between October and November where there's no sport on in Australia whatsoever apart from some international games. So it meant that women's cricket on a Friday, Saturday and a Sunday night was the only sport on. So everyone just watched it. It was unbelievable. Whoever thought of that was, genius. So you're not competing then against obviously the men's games. So that's now all separate. But from, my organisation where I work, next door to my office is Adam Griffith, and then Jeff Vaughan, who's the Tigers. We have a lot of conversations. I'm pretty close with Jeff now, and we all have the same dilemmas and the same successes. It's all the same, no matter if it's male or female. So yeah, I love the collaboration piece. It's probably the one thing that I really miss in England, and you notice that from the geography. I used to, at my time at Loughborough, I used to go and sit next to Shiny. I had my own office, but I just like those little pocket conversations. And over here, obviously from state to state, you're so far away from each other, and there's actually fierce rivalry. Like when I played Australia, I always felt you were playing against 12 people anyway, but it's just inbuilt in their system. Like the sharing of information between states, when it gets to the thing, you get nothing. If you want a little bit of help and guidance, not a chance. So yeah, you've got to utilize the people in your organisation because you just don't cross paths over here.
Yeah, and then Frank, so you're obviously involved in the T10 league, like you said. How does sort of training structure around a T10 game? Is it simply just rock up and try and hit the ball as far as you can?
Yeah, that's pretty much it, mate, if I'm honest. We had 3 days, and I tried to convince myself I needed to have an open mind about it. It was pretty chaotic because everybody wanted to get involved and crack on. But yeah, it was just the ultimate highlights package. We had quite a diverse player group, from someone like Chris Gale, who's played more cricket than most, through to a young lad called Kushal Malla, who was a 16-year-old who was playing for Nepal. So we had a very diverse group, and some of them are still very much finding their way. So they need a lot more volume. You're trying to sharpen up your fielding as much as anything, making sure that when you're putting a scratch team together at quite short notice, to get that understanding of how the fielding group's going to work is important. Individual skills as players move around the world among franchise cricket, they tend to travel with the kit. Some will have good competitions, some will fail, and that was pretty much how it worked. I think the format is here to stay. If I'm honest, I think it's a really, really good format for countries who don't have a lot of cricket being played in it. I think it's a great way to start the game, and I think that's the best way I can leave it, having been there for a very short snapshot of 3 weeks. I think if we were going to grow the game globally, T10 cricket is perfect for it.
Yeah. And then what have you guys found sort of the most challenging within coaching? People. It's just people. Every day it's people. And through good and bad, and the most challenging of situations in my mind, it's
It's the interaction. It's the engagement with each other. It's the fallout. It's the success. It's the let's go and do it again. It's all of that for me. It's about understanding each other, trying to get to know more, and making sure that you're in the best place to succeed.
I'd agree with you there, Frankie. We had an interesting moment, didn't we, last year during one of the T20 games when it was going to the wire, and we'd split the dressing room. So we had a dressing room, and is it the exec suite, Frankie? I don't know Trent Bridge as well as you, yeah, mate. And Frankie is incredibly calm. He's basically called the general because he's got this amazingly sort of authoritative demeanor about him most of the time. Every now and again, the lads are given a little bit of a spray, but then they're fine after that. But it was extraordinary because I sit quite deadpan when I watch. I used to get terribly. This was one of my learnings from being Somerset head coach. I used to get pretty emotional, and it would affect players around me. So now I pretty much go deadpan. And trust me, I'm absolutely burning inside. But I just watched the general come in, and literally he exploded next to me, which was great because I'd not seen it for a while. And I really quite enjoyed it. And we ended up having a great conversation about it, didn't we? And that if you can't find a place in the game, because you do, as you watch these cricketers and you want them to do so well, as coaches, you've got to find your outlet. And I think, for me, one of the worst parts, but it comes with it, is where is your outlet? You've got to try and keep yourself level enough to be able to be useful during the game. The training side of it is beautiful, and where you're trying to develop players, that's almost the quiet side of the game. That the bit that you struggle to affect is when they're out in the middle, and that's where I love to watch other coaches and how they deal with it. And I think that's where a huge part of my development around the tougher sides of the game are watching people like the General and Peter Moores, who've seen far more county cricket and cricket than I have over the last few years, because a lot of my work's been in development and just quick tours here and there.
Right, yeah. And would you say the same, Salliann? Or?
What's the most challenging? I think leading change is the most challenging thing for me. And when I say change, I think adjustment. Whatever you're doing, people are always trying to adjust, and it's not easy. I think adjustment can be quite scary. And I think in the head coach position, the bit that I'm always developing is that when you're leading change, you have to manage sideways, you have to manage up, and you have to manage down. And never assume that people are on the journey, because that trips you up. So, and that has to be constant, that messaging about, what are we doing, why are we doing, and get really excited about it. But yeah, it's making sure everyone is on the same path all the time. And you've always got to find time to keep referring to why are you doing what you're doing, and this is how we're going to do it, and keep people on board. That's certainly my biggest challenge.
Sal, can I ask you a quick question on that? Do you do that individually with your players and your management staff, or do you try and get them in together and keep the message moving sort of jointly as a group?
It does depend, but from a staff point of view, I do it both. So, we meet weekly. I meet my SSM staff weekly. And then we have a collective group of, I guess, objectives that I work through staff with individually, which we've just gone through that process, even though I guess we're in the thick of it. But it's amazing, actually. People say, meeting for a meeting, but once you create that connection, you see things that you've never seen before from people. And my word, that gets exciting. Like, it gives you another spring in your step. So it does depend, I reckon, Shiny, on the people as well, because some people need more attention than others. But we meet weekly in those certain pockets, and then just making sure from an individual point of view, people have got all the support they need. I think challenge comes easy, but the support is the biggest and the hardest thing to manage at times as well.
And then who looks after you?
Certain people that I've had to work hard at making sure I've got mentors around me. I had mentors, but I didn't invest in them properly. And I do that now, and I've seen the benefit for one, keeping my confidence where it needs to be, because every coach has self-doubt. But also making sure I'm learning all the time, because again, you can get so immersed in your own organization that you lose a different perspective. And then, I think my boss is really important. So I've actually got a relationship with my boss, high performance manager, that is very close, and we speak fairly regular, which I like. And it's not always about work, so we've got a stronger relationship than just wins and losses as well, which I think is important. I feel supported and valued. But yeah, if it's not going well, sometimes I will want to avoid those certain things, but they're so important to stay connected.
And then Salliann, a question from Hannah, the ladies captain. So how does your elite ladies training look like in relation to the men's? Is it similar to what Kevin was saying before and what Francie was saying?
Yes. It's funny actually, because I'll ask for things and the comment I'll get back from our operations manager is sometimes, well, the men don't even get that. I'm like, I don't care. High performance is high performance. And if you say that to me one more time, I will slap you in the face. That's, I think it depends on your organization, but, I've been very fortunate to work with some amazing people. And I've listened to Shiny talk so much about paceball, and I could listen to all day. Some of the stuff that I've learned from him, I've taken into the environment that we have in Tassie. And don't always expect that certain organisations are where you think they should be, because I think professional cricket's actually got a long way to go. It's from a certain extent. So I would say, and this is hand on heart, that the girls train just as hard or even more. And I think that's more so because where they're at in their cricket as well. You'll have different types of cricketers, and the men's program, the professionalization's been there for a very long time. A lot of those guys know their game quite well, and I'm not saying they don't train as less, but they just need to focus on the simple things. But yeah, Hannah, the girls are working really hard, and we're trying to pave the way. Actually, the girls are all professional over here, but they don't get paid the same as the men. So yeah, we're not interested in waiting for other people to open doors. We're putting in the hard work, and then hopefully we'll bang the door down, and people will listen a little bit more in the round, the support that we need.
And then what sort of advice, again, is from Hannah, would you give to your captains, your players ahead of sort of like the season and matches?
Captains, you need to be comfortable with not being liked at times. You're going to have to make some tough decisions. And you will be supported no matter what from me in around whatever you decide on that. But the captains that I think have worked the best are the ones that are still connected. They're able to adapt their styles to certain people's, but are comfortable with at times that I'm going to upset someone by a decision I make, but this is for the sake of the team, and my job is not to hurt this team. I can hurt you every now and then, and I can salvage the relationship a bit later, but my job is the team.
And then a question to any of you guys is, we've got quite a few young coaches on the platform here. So did you guys all start from a young age as well? And did you think that sort of helped your own games?
Yeah, I did. I did my original NCA qualifications. I started when I was 19. I was a young professional at Hampshire, and Hampshire were great. They paid to put us through our coaching awards, and I was actually part of Berkshire Cricket, so I'm a Berkshire lad, and two brilliant coaches, one called Ralph Deller and Les Smith. They sort of took me in and allowed me to coach with them, the old staff coaching, and that just grew my passion. So I've coached all the way through, and I really enjoyed all my qualifications. Absolutely loved them, and I think the actual coach ed system that was in place when it was old NCA, and then when it moved on, and you had, already mentioned him before, Gordon Lord and Francie and Sal know him really well. An amazing man who we have got. I think England cricket have got an awful lot to be grateful to Lordy for, because pretty much all of the coaches who've come through have come through Lordy and his caring way. And if I could give advice to any young coaches, it's do your qualifications. Absolutely, go out there, embrace them, do them. And then Sally sort of mentioned there, find some mentors and some people, not necessarily in cricket. I was lucky enough to have a guy called Dave Allred, as Lordy actually arranged for him to be my mentor. I got 14 days a year with him during my time with the ECB. And to have someone from outside cricket was really, really refreshing, and gave me a completely different perspective on just coaching in general. So that would be my, don't think you've got your qualification and that's it. Actually, that's the pathway to going even further as a coach, and that's been massively enjoyable.
Yeah, I started very young as well. So, in the teens, and it was more so, to get a bit of extra pocket money. I'm not saying it paid well as, coaching the under 11s, but I just really enjoyed it. But it wasn't until I was 18, I'd got my level 2 by then, and I think I was 20 and I did my level 3. But as Shani said, my experience through the ECB coach education was fantastic. I loved my level 4. It was hard work doing a full-time job, and then it's pretty much like a degree, but you don't really do much in the sense of learning the game, but all the stuff we did about integrated practice, how to manage systems, how to manage people, I'm so thankful for those experiences.
And then you mentioned, Paul, that you did quite a little bit in Australia as well. So was yours the same, starting at a young age?
Yeah, probably a little bit later, based on the fact I was very focused on playing. Similar to Shiny, as you sort of get a little bit later into your 20s, you start to think about what's coming next, and that was when I probably started to take it seriously. I think the one thing what I would encourage is not to feel as though as a coach that you're not going to get stuff wrong. I think there's this perception that coaches aren't allowed to make mistakes, and we do. And you've got to give yourself a little bit of room with that. It's important to have the right people around you to understand those mistakes, and you can talk through them with them. If you get it wrong, then you get it wrong. It's just like anything else. So I've been fortunate to make mistakes as I've gone along. I've been supported with that. And Salliann mentioned earlier on about confidence and trying to keep your confidence levels up, because often we can lose our confidence quickly as players lose confidence. And the hardest bit with that then is how we rediscover it. Now we get our mojo back, if you like, and we can get coaching well and looking after the players properly. So yeah, getting into it, get those mistakes going. Don't try and hide from them. Feel like they're going to benefit you, and then get moving from there.
And then probably one for you, Kevin. It's coming from the Robinsons. They want to know, are England doing enough to sort of blood young fast bowlers? Is that a priority? Because obviously, if they're sort of saying if Anderson and Broad both retire at the same sort of time, they're in their 30s, is there enough sort of players coming through the system to step up? So
it's a brilliant question. So my job was to produce a corral of fast bowlers who could perform at international level. I'm incredibly proud of the guys that have come through that have not played, and there are many, many of those, and that won't play, but have all been good enough. And I'm going to base that on knowing what the bowlers who've played for England are like. So from Jimmy and from Stuart, I saw those as very, very young lads and was lucky enough to work with them coming through. So in a funny sort of way, they've been the problem, because remember, there are two best bowlers ever, over 1,000 wickets between them. They are brilliant. They've caused a bit of a logjam. because there's only ever really been one spot up for grabs, because Ben Stokes would have that all-rounder slot because he's good enough to play as a fast bowler on his own. So the other answer to the question is yes, there are lots out there, and we've got one of them in Jake Ball. We've got a couple of young bowlers who are coming through, one especially called Zach Chappell, who's been on pace programs before. You know, they have the attributes, and if you were to go through county cricket and look, you know, the people who haven't been able to play. So let's take Jamie Porter at the moment. You know, you just can't stop taking wickets. He's a 60, 70 wicket a year bowler, but has never had a go at playing for his country. If we go a little bit further back, at Glenn Chappell, who pretty much every player, Frankie included, would say, how on earth has that guy not played for England? You know, bottom line is we've had two absolute legends playing for England and have helped us to become very, very successful. But that won't last forever. And we have got to be able to blood our next lot of fast bowlers coming through. And you do have to learn to play at that level. And one thing I would say, so from a fast bowling perspective, playing for England would be different to county cricket, and actually, in a strange way, slightly more suits fast bowlers, because you don't have to bowl as much. You know, it's not as brutal with the amount of games. So, I mean, it's 8 fixtures, isn't it, Francie? First 8 fixtures in a row, there's 3 days in between each fixture. And then we go straight into T20, and they stick 2 more games in the middle of that. And then you go into 50 overs, and then you go into the rest of your championship games. With England, okay, so we're playing back-to-back tests at the moment because of COVID. They're trying to squeeze everything in and keep the bubble as short as they can. But generally, there's some decent rest between them. And those players, remember, during the year, they have a really well thought out program, you know, with brilliant science and med people looking after them. So there is a group of fast bowlers below who are being looked after. There's a lad called Ollie Robinson who's been going out with them, Craig Overton, Jamie Overton, you know, Saqib Mahmood. They've got lots of guys who they are really trying to look after now. So when eventually spaces come, and let's hope Jimmy goes on for another 2, 3, 4 years. Stuart goes on for another 5, 6, 7 years, because they're unbelievably good. And also they help our young bowlers massively. They are really giving people who will accelerate their transition into the game. It is coming, and there are some really exciting bowlers down there. But people are going to have to be patient, because they're going to have to learn their craft at that level and in different conditions.
Yeah, and then another question actually around this from someone that Francie knows very well, from Chris Edwards, is there's plenty of young quicks at the moment sort of getting stress fractures at a very young age. He's an Australian, so he's listed Cummins, Berendorf and Pattinson. Is there anything behind this, or is it, you know, maybe a spike in workload potentially?
Go on, Johnny. Fire on your stress fracture.
I thought that was for you.
No, he just knows me.
So, is there a reason for
sort of stress fractures? So a lot of the same sort of injuries. Like I said, he's listed 3 Australians there.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was plenty in England as well.
Yeah, so there's new research that comes out on stress fractures. Originally, it was mixed actions. That's been proven to not be the case. Then it was workloads. There's definitely something in that, but it's definitely not the answer. I think some people are predisposed to injuries. I'll give you the example of, I've used it quite a lot on Coach Ed presentations that I do. If you put a picture, remember Simon Jones, England and Glamorgan and Worcester, I put a picture of him up, and he is absolutely ripped to shreds, looks amazing. And then you put one of the first pictures of Jimmy up before he really started to look up. 2 totally different, cut the heads off, and said, which one do you think lasts the longest? And they all go for Simon Jones. You know, there's something there that predisposes you to injury, but it doesn't mean you have to go out of the game or you get more injured. it's a conundrum that I don't think we've answered yet, but I know the ECB and the science and med team are fantastically diligent, and they're trying to answer this. I'm lucky enough that I still get all the newest research through, and luckily I'm trying to make sure that Notts are top of that tree. So Andy Pick, who now brilliant to work with our best young bowlers. We've had some biomechanical assessments made of our young academy lads, and we're using the newest research to try and coach these guys into natural but better positions, so they'll be less predisposed to stress fractures. I think stress fractures are a really interesting one. So I know that I had a spinal X-ray quite a while ago, and it showed up that I had 2 cracks in my back. I never actually stopped bowling for a stress fracture. I probably had a sore back. Got to the end of the season, it healed, and then you come back. And what we do in county cricket now and international cricket is we do a lot of scans. So you get some sort of pain, and bam, you scan straight away, and that shows up a stress fracture. So I bet if you scan, frankly, I think you've had stress fracture, haven't you?
No. Touch what I didn't, Shiny, but I bet
you probably had. If you've had a sore back,
Yeah.
you might have had a stress fracture. But some people will have been able to bowl through it. And there are many more injuries out there. So ankle spurs are out there, tendinopathies of the knees. It's just the stress fracture is a bit of a headline grabber, and it's a season ender. It's now not, thankfully, in most cases, it's not a career ender. So, there's a lot of, really, really good research and treatments going on into that. And going back to my original message is, don't worry about injuries as long as you're doing everything you can with your training, with your recovery, with your nutrition, you're making your action as smooth and as efficient as it can possibly be within its own natural boundaries. Get them to go out there and love and enjoy the game.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then finally, just to wrap it up, if you could give a young coach or a coach some advice for the future, or potentially the best bit of advice all 3 of you have had, what would it be?
Probably people over systems is massive. They're both important, but make sure you look after your people. And never stop learning. So the biggest thing I realised once I left the Loughborough and the ECB environment, which I was in there for 7 or 8 years, to a completely new one where I didn't know anyone. I learned so much in the space of 12 months. So you've got to have people around you that are trust and are loyal at times, but my word, you've got to find people that are going to take you to a new place as well.
Just on that, how have you found sort of keeping up to date with current technology and current coaching information, if you like, as opposed to when you first started out?
From like being in Tasmania, because that's a different story in itself, or in general?
In general, but yeah, if you want to lead it down being in Tasmania, you can too.
Yeah, I still walk to get my paper here. It's we're still trying to get there. But no, I've still got all those connections, which is great. And I'm not probably as advanced as Shiny, who gets all hot off the press research, which is now going to forward to me, by the way, in around fast bowling. But yeah, I'm pretty lucky in that space through the connections that I've made from those coaches. And, I feel that if I don't know an area that I need to, there's always someone or somewhere that's going to help me out and make sure I'm, I guess, better upskilled in that area.
Yeah. And then, Kevin, what would your advice be to a young coach, or the best advice you've ever had?
I've had some amazing advice from some great people. I'd say now being pretty old, at 52 years old, I just every day, I know it sounds a little bit corny, and this is probably where the mentor I mentioned, a guy called Dave Allred, who was Johnny Wilkinson's kicking coach, and then has moved. He was Francesco Molinari's performance coach. He's worked in so many different sports. He just kept saying to me, every day, how can you improve? And whoever you come across, with however you coach, can they improve? What can you give them to just improve them, either as a person or as a player or whatever? You know, and Sal said there, never stop learning. You know, I tend not to read books anymore. I read articles or, you know, the journals and that I quite like. I just go for abstracts and just quickly read the abstract. Is there anything interesting I can have a little look at from there? You know, and it's just around that. Can I keep improving myself every single day? And I think the day that I stop doing that will be the day that the boots go up and the surfboard comes out for good.
Brilliant. I'd agree with both of those. Absolutely. I come back to the people thing, and players and teams will hang on every word that every coach ever says. They'll all read into things differently. So keep your radar up, use your words wisely. And if you're not sure what to say, then say nothing.
No, very good. Thank you very much. And thanks very much for coming on. Obviously, Salliann, you got up ridiculously early, so no doubt, Franks, you are going to repay that favour. So,
yes.
Hold on, Sal.
What time is it, Sal?
It's now 6:15 in the morning.
You go and get your paper now.
Tasmania just sounds like a bigger version of Guernsey, to be honest, when you said about getting your paper.
Oh, well, probably is, because it's absolutely stunning. I absolutely love living here. But yeah, it's eye-opening.
No, excellent. But no, really appreciate your time, and thanks very much for coming on and giving your information across.
Thank you for having me.
Really
Cheers,
enjoyable.
guys. Good to see you.
Thanks very much.
Cheerio, bye.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Cheers. Thank you very much.